As a teenage singer-songwriter from New Jersey in the mid-'60s, Janis Ian had one of the most remarkable debuts in modern music history. At age 14, she scored a hit single, Society's Child, about an interracial love relationship, which launched her career. She then began performing in New York City clubs with other singers, soon-to-be legends, and her songwriting and singing was heralded by no less than Leonard Bernstein. She would follow this with her biggest hit at 17 and continued a career that has spanned 5 decades, winning Grammys while overcoming significant personal obstacles and producing an indelible body of music. Ian has earned a devoted following and critical acclaim. Janis Ian, Breaking the Silence, is a new movie about her extraordinary life directed by Varda Bar-Kar and which lands in theaters this week. It includes interviews with Ian and her collaborators, along with Arlo Guthrie, Joan Baez, Tomlin, Jean Smart, among others. This remarkable portrait uses Ian's songbook and her turbulent life story to capture a portrait of an artist and her songs that personified a generation of American women. Join us as we sit down with the director on Inside the Art House, starting now.
Hi, everyone. My name is Greg Lemley.
And I'm Raphael Sparge.
And welcome to this episode of Inside the Art House. Today, we are joined with filmmaker Varda Bar-Kar, who's here to talk about her new film, Janis Ian, Breaking Silence. Hi, Varda.
Hi, great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
I love this film, and it's such an amazing journey that you take. The scope of this story, the depth and the breadth of her journey is so astounding. How much of that did you know when you started this, and how much did you discover?
I knew none of it. I knew absolutely nothing. All I knew was the album Between the Lines, and I knew the album Stars and Aftertones, which is what sort of got me interested in making this film. I had listened to the album Between the Lines when I was in high school, and I was very, very moved by it. It just made me feel seen and heard. It was music that I really identified with, and I felt they were very honest and truthful, and they were very affirming of my feelings at the time.
So as you're going through the process, is it as you're making the film that you're discovering how incredible her life is? Or at what point did you read the autobiography that she wrote, Breaking Silence?
It actually started when I'd finished my film Fandango at the Wall, and I was thinking about what I wanted to do next. There was a lot of discussion about identity, so I started to think about my own identity and how I identify and whether I feel represented in the media. And the answer to that, in my mind at least at that time, was no. So I started to think about, what if I made a film about someone with whom I closely identify? Who would that be? And I knew I wanted to make another music film. This is my third music documentary. So I thought, who would this artist be? And I just kind of sat with that question, invited it in, the response in, for a few weeks. And then Janis Ian popped into my mind. And that's how it started. And I was like, ooh, Janis Ian. I don't know anything about her. So
I know the music, right?
I know the music, but I don't know her story. Yeah. I don't know her story. And again, I only knew those 3 albums in regards to her music. So the first thing I did was start to listen to the music I did know. And then I started to discover all this other music she'd written that I absolutely loved. And I made a list of about 100 songs I really, really like. And then I saw she'd written an autobiography. I ordered the autobiography immediately and just read it. And thought, oh my God, this is incredible. I mean, not only is she an extraordinary artist, but what a life she has led. Someone has got to have made a film about her. So then I started to research documentary, Janis Ian, everywhere. I couldn't find it. No one had made a film about her, which I think is shocking. But it kind of goes back to my original inquiry about not feeling represented. So it's not a coincidence, I think. So then I found she had a website, and I went to her website, and she had a contact page, and I said, hello, my name is Varda Bar-Kar, and I'm a filmmaker, and I'd love to make a film about you.
How did she respond to the query, and what were those early conversations like as you started talking to her about this?
Well, the first thing, I got an email back from someone who works with her, who responds to, I guess, queries like mine. And she said, well, Janis is curious to see what you've done. So I sent her links to Fandango at the Wall, to my film Big Voice, and actually to another piece I did, she recently reminded me, called What Kind of Planet Are You On?, which is a sort of sci-fi short that I thought she might find interesting. Because, of course, on the autobiography, I learned she was very into science fiction. a couple of weeks later, I got a message back saying, Janis watched your work. She really likes it and would love to speak with you. And we had that initial conversation, which I think was about 2 hours long.
And what was important to her about you telling the story? What was, I mean, clearly by giving you permission to tell this, was there something that it was important for her to underline or to illustrate? Did she have creative control? What was communicated there?
I mean, the first thing she said to me was, I'm not a celebrity. And I said, I know. I wouldn't want to make a film about a celebrity. I want to make a film about an artist, or the full thing.
Right.
And then we talked about how she said, I would love it if you included the times I lived in, which was my intention. I love to create layers. If you look at my other films as well, there's multiple stories happening. And I did think it was a great opportunity to explore the time she lived in. So we were totally aligned on that. I mean, I shared with her that I practice Zen Buddhism. That seemed to be meaningful, I think, just in regards to feeling like she could trust me maybe a little bit. I feel I had to earn that trust to a certain degree. We had multiple kind of conversations back and forth for over a year. But while I was already had started to work on the film. But I think that she's highly intuitive. I don't know how she'd feel if I shared this, but my experience is almost on the verge of being psychic. Like she'll send me notes of things I haven't even said yet. Like she's anticipating them. She's very intuitive. It's incredible, actually. She trusted her intuition based on the work I'd done and our conversations, and I think just my way of interacting. I feel incredibly honored that she did allow me to make this film. It's an incredible privilege.
It's an astounding story, set against the events of history and how she played through them, both musically and personally. It's really moving. It's really moving.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that.
Raphael and I are not strangers to this idea of documentary filmmaker and documentary subject. We started this podcast following Raphael making a movie about Laemmle Theaters, where he, not completely unknown to me, but sort of walked in and said, I want to, here are the previous documentaries I've made, which I knew about, and I want to make my next documentary about Laemmle Theaters. I did not have an autobiography that he could read to catch up on the subject, or a list of music that I had produced. But, there's a level where it's a process of discovery. You don't necessarily know, as the subject of the film, you do throw your trust behind a filmmaker. And in my case, I didn't actually see the film until it premiered to the public. So I'm kind of curious when Janis saw the film.
Well, there was 2 phases. The first phase, to me, a little bit of the beginning is a blur because I was so excited at the time and thrilled that she had agreed to do it. She wanted to see something to kind of get her head around it.
Cut together? In other words, shot and cut together?
Cut together. But I also wanted to, again, there was an incredible alignment because I also needed to create a piece to continue to raise funds for the film.
Right,
sure.
Right, of course.
And I did that with my prior 2 films as well. So we created about an 18-minute proof of concept and finished it. So in other words, the colors, sound design, everything to really create something that will demonstrate what the final piece will kind of feel like and look like. And I showed that to her. That was maybe 6 months in. She approved of it, yes. So then after that, we had a full kind of, I think trust was then instilled after she saw that piece. Yes, we earned that trust at that point.
Yes, her interview serves as kind of a thread through the whole movie. Did you start there? Did you sit down with her and just say, okay, let's tell the story? How did that work for you?
I think the very first thing we did an initial Zoom interview because actually when we started, COVID was still in place. So we were still isolated. I will say, she's so incredibly articulate. She has such a way with words. It's
astoundingly.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she's a very good storyteller. And she really knows how to spin a yarn, in a good way. Yes, we had an initial interview on Zoom. Then we had 2 additional in-person interviews. And then we drew on some archival interviews that we wove together. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, in regards to discovering her story, I also, beyond the autobiography and research I had done online and so forth, the interviewees, the people who we interviewed, knew her and were close to her. Some throughout her whole life and some through significant periods in her life. And I learned a lot from them. Yeah. And I learned things from them that aren't even in the autobiography. And yeah, that's
because it just another facet, another perspective. Right.
Yes,
right.
They could provide more details or, go a little bit more in depth about certain things.
Yeah. Right.
So we did do, I guess, what we call a radio edit, where we used the audio first to figure out the structure of the story and to tell the story. And then we started to bring in the visuals.
Right.
So here's the thing, basically, as a filmmaker, when you tell a story about something that happened in the past, we are dealt with a series of hard and harder options, right? Which is like, how do you tell the story? How do you tell it visually? It's not a radio play. Your filmmaking ability, in terms of all the choices you made, is just exquisite. The way you use both, reenactments, then you have, of course, intertwined with actual real footage and or footage from the period. Then you have animation, and then you have sort of layering and or sort of shots that kind of create mood. Can you talk about how you, just as a filmmaker, how you began to kind of really sort of do that? Was that all laid out at the top? Was that something that you built as you went? Because it's so complex, and I know how hard it is you did, and to do it well. I mean, I have such respect for what you did.
Thank you. Well, thank you for recognizing it. I mean, on a certain level, I've noticed that some people just accept it, and it's just as though it just all naturally came together like that, which is a compliment, actually. It's like it was so easy,
Right, you just happened to be there 50 years ago in a room with a camera, right?
But you know what it takes. That was
it's hard. It's really hard, and to make it look seamless, and the fact that you could sort of match the color stocks, and the fact that it would just kind of it's very artfully done.
Thank you. Well, I have a great team, I have to say. And I'll tell you where that whole thing came from, how it came to be this way. But I just want to acknowledge we had an incredible editor, Ryan Larkin. Of course, our DP, Matthew Wilder, I think did a fantastic job. And we worked with a post house that actually I'd worked with on Fandango at the Wall called Dynamita Post. And they did all our color and sound, and actually they have a composer they work with that I worked with on this as well. So, and everyone was very 100% plus committed. I mean, because I'm not easy on that level. Ryan is a perfectionist, the editor. Everyone was just up for it. I mean, I was telling, actually, Patrick, my husband, it's amazing how it just flowed. Everyone was just in all the way. So that makes a big difference, because it does take a lot to create that cohesion. And where that came from was when I was thinking about how to approach the look and feel of the film, I have this philosophy, which I know all filmmakers share, and that is that, everything is working towards telling the same story. And so how it's shot and what shots and how it looks and how it feels, it's all working together. So the way the footage, sometimes I feel like reenactments are kind of stuck in there as though it doesn't count. Like we just need to show that this happened type thing. Mm-hmm. To me, it's part of the film. It has to be on the same level as everything else. The same with the interviews. You can't just, in my opinion at least, just stick down the camera and just get the shot of the interviewee. How it's shot. The interviews, for example, the backdrops were inspired by those blue. In the 1970s, they used to go into the back of drugstores and have these blue backdrops where they do family photos.
Oh, wow. So just to explain, you do a series of many of your interviews have a blue backdrop that's pulled that you can see as a backdrop, and you shoot your subjects against them. And it's a wonderful kind of a through line through all of them. But I didn't know the tie back to the 1970s sort of drugstore. That's really cool.
Thank you. And I thought it was important for it to be simple because there's so much complexity. So I thought some simple backgrounds would be helpful. So we're not adding on top of to give
just
you
visually
a breath.
Right.
Yeah. And then collage was very popular in the 60s and 70s. So I thought, how about if we make like a living collage and we combine photographs and we combine archival footage and stock footage and our mood shots and then the animation and text. And we just weave it all together to create this whole, and it's again evocative of the times, which, collage it was very popular during that period. And then we also used a lot of Zooms, which were very popular in the 60s and 70s. People, before it became a no-no to Zoom, you could actually Zoom.
Yes.
And that was another, element that we put in there. And that came from the times, the 60s and 70s.
Really, and you have that great thing where you're pulling back from the interviews and you're shooting the interviewee, which is just a nice additional sort of layer.
So that came from my idea that this is a film about Janis Ian's life, music, and times. And part of her life in this moment is that a documentary is being made about her. So that's why I decided, this is part of it. This is part of the telling, is this documentary. So I thought it was important to show.
Yeah, let's please, we can take a look at a clip of the film. It's a good time to let people see a little bit of the film. So let's run that right now.
When I started out, I wanted to be a Beatle. I wanted to be really famous. I wanted to be the person that couldn't walk down the street because everybody would stop me and ask for my autograph.
What do you consider yourself, Janis?
Just a singer.
Singer?
Yeah.
Of any particular notoriety?
Infamously, yes. I mean, it's an unreal thing to have a hit record in the first place. And it's even more unreal to have a hit record where everybody runs around saying you're the new Bob Dylan, the new Messiah, yada, yada.
I congratulate you on what I'm sure is going to be a brilliant career.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming to see us.
Forget about glory because that fades. Being an artist, it's about service. It's about feeling like you are part of something bigger than yourself. Music is about telling stories. This is mine.
So sweet. So good. Hey, I thought about this when I watched this clip before we were going to sit down together, which was just what she says at the very beginning, is that when she started this, she wanted to be a Beatle. And what's interesting is that the entire film almost says something different, which is that she actually, because she was so committed to being an artist and her artistry and committing to her lyrics and what she felt, and it so came from the inside. And I wondered what your sense of that juxtaposition was.
All performers and artists want an audience. And I think to a certain degree, maybe it's a way of affirming our creative drive or our talent, that we need it to be seen and heard, and we need to be recognized for it. Not even necessarily from an ego place, although obviously it can be. Something's got to get the engine going. And I think in her case, when she was young and the Beatles were happening and Bob Dylan and she knew that she had this talent. As a youngster, that's what first got her going. Of course, she came to realize quite quickly that fame is not what we imagine it to be, with her experience with Society's Child. Yeah.
I mean, there's a quote from Janis in the press book. I'm not remembering if it's in the film itself, but it's kind of interesting to think about here. In response to something she heard from Stella Adler, she said, "The work is everything, the rest is dust." But again, I'm having watched the film, there's a level where I don't think that's true.
Really? What do you mean by that?
Well, in the sense that, her life, her being is so incredibly important. And yes, the work that she's created, augments that. This is a film that's not just about the music that someone has made, but the life that they've lived. And I guess in that sense, I don't think her life is dust. I think her life is incredibly important and meaningful, and we can learn a lot from that.
That's true. I think about her life, and we can be speaking about this story. It is very layered because she created this music. And that music that she created will live on. And this documentary itself is also a work through which you have learned about her life and her music and her times. And that is how this will live on. There is a lot of meaning in the moment and in our lives. We don't all need to be artists and make work. But for artists, their work is their legacy. Their work, it will always, no matter what's going on in your life, you've made that work and it will live on. So I think that's what I understand it. You have to ask Janis, but that's sort of what I understand what she's saying. And it's, yes. It is in the film, by the way. It is in the film.
It is in the film.
For sure. The thing that's so powerful, of course, is, I mean, look, there are lots of wonderful documentaries about amazing musicians, and they oftentimes focus on the music and then maybe some sort of things about their life, but it's really music forward. What you've done is really sort of create a portrait of a woman, you know, from a teenager to however old she is now. I never ask a woman's age, but let's just say, you know, having lived
60+ years of her life.
Figure out the math on the years, right? Which is that you really tell a story of a life lived with purpose and a life lived with a kind of a a trajectory that's bigger than even the music. Did you know that? Because I mean, I was perhaps like you. I loved her songs. I'm not aware of her story, and I didn't know how much of a kind of an advocate for LGBTQ that she is or became. Is that something that you were aware of? And how did that factor then into you telling the story?
I was not aware of it when, in the very initial, Janis Ian came to my mind.
Sure.
I did become aware of it, you know, once I read her autobiography. It's a very important to me that she is a, advocate for LGBTQ rights. I myself identify as bisexual while I am with a man and my husband. I've had relationships with women. One of my daughters identifies as lesbian. So I feel that part of that community. And I do think, especially during the times we live in now, I have trans friends. I have friends of all ilk. For me, I share Janis's view. The world is more beautiful with different types of people expressing themselves in different ways. And I think true freedom is to be free to be who you are and who you want to be. That is freedom. And as Herb Jordan says in the film, the most fundamental right there is to be able to love who you want. And these are values that I think are incredibly important and that I share with Janis, and I'm glad are, expressed within the film.
Yeah.
Now, there's another part of Janis's identity that comes out in the film. It's the milieu in which she grew up. She's Jewish. She was born Jewish. I guess I won't say how she believes now, but she grew up within that sort of labor Zionist, or certainly labor affiliated Jewish milieu, and it comes out in the film. I mean, there's one scene where she talks about being a Maccabee, in terms of her desire to, go up against more powerful forces and defeat them. Where did that come up in the filmmaking, both from her youth and in her later years, perhaps?
Yes. I don't know if she's a Zionist, so that's that's a very complicated word.
It's become
right
a very
now,
complicated word now. Yes,
it has so many different meanings.
Yeah.
So we'll kind of put
we'll put a pin on that one.
We'll put a pin on that because we don't even know what that means anymore.
So true.
Fair enough.
But to be Jewish, yes, I am also Jewish. That was an important part of the story. Our Jewish identity has, very much shapes many of our values and how we, create in the world. I think that is, as Janis states in the film, and as you just stated, when you're up against difficulties, we inherit that. Jewish people have had a lot of struggles and have overcome many obstacles through, thousands and thousands of years. And I think we carry that with us. Janis is an incredibly resilient human being, and perhaps some of that resilience comes out of her Jewish heritage. And I think a great example to all, whether Jewish or not, that we can get knocked down and we can hit rock bottom and we can build ourselves back up. And she has empowered me in that way, actually, through observing and, being witness to her incredible resilience. There's other, culture is often very important in the Jewish traditions. She loves art, she loves music, she's got this joie de vivre, embracing different aspects of society. And then her, very sort of acceptance of differences, I think is very much a Jewish tendency. So
well, it can be. I mean,
it can be.
It's not genetic, I guess.
It's not genetic, but
unfortunately,
But culturally, she was brought up that way.
Well, the culture that she came out of. And you know, I mean, I love that some of my closest friends are the kids I went to summer camp with. And I love that one of, you know, the people that you interview in the film is someone who she's known since she was probably 13, from those summer camp years. And not just those friendships, but as I think the film does point out, many of the lessons, the moral and ethical lessons that she learned in that environment are present throughout her life.
Yes. Her parents were civil rights activists. You know, she grew up sitting on Pete Seeger's lap and singing. And so those camps, I think, are marvelous. I actually read a whole book about those camps in researching the film. I was going to spend a lot more time in that period because I just think it's so fascinating and so beautiful and so incredible that these camps existed. And I think, you know, to a certain degree, they still do. And they were so important to her. But I agree. I think that's, you know, I'm glad you brought that up because I think those camps were, you know, made a huge impression on her.
You know, we all know stories of child prodigies who essentially have a very auspicious kind of launch, and you can't get more launch than Leonard Bernstein kissing your hand, and saying what a great career you're gonna have, and that they literally are like comets; they just burn out, they flame out because they can't sustain it. Whatever it was, whether it was her faith or just her humanity or just her strength, the fact that she continued to be able to kind of go until it's almost like she implodes and then she literally rebuilds again. And you captured that sort of almost decade after decade in terms of, to where she is now. Clearly that was something that you were thinking about, I guess, or you know, how she continued to sort of redefine herself. Did that come out in the interviews? And I wonder how she spoke about that.
Yeah, she has had very significant aspirations and has managed to, achieve great things. But when she was younger, when she was a teenager and she'd written that song, Society's Child, she was just writing about what she knew about. To her, as we just discussed, her parents were in the civil rights movement. She was, in integrated camps. And she saw, a girl and a boy together, and one happened to be, African American, the other one was white. But she just wrote about that, and then it turns out that was a very difficult thing for the society that she lived in, the United States of America, to accept at the time. But it was a very important song in that it stimulated those kinds of discussions amongst families, and it's brought to light that there was this kind of racism at the time. And it was just a very important song that was, very influential. It ended up, because of the controversy, that's a lot for a teenager to take, both the fame, death threats, the pressures of the record company. That's a lot, even for an adult. She had the wisdom to step out for a while and regather herself, get therapy and help, and her community and friends helped her and were there for her. And that's the thing I think the film really demonstrates through the different people who we interview. These are all people who've been very important in her life. And it says a lot about her, these extraordinary human beings who helped tell her story in the film and are still in her life today. She has a very rich community of friends.
You've got an amazing list of interviews. Honest. You've got Joan Baez and Arlo Guthrie. What were the response when you went to people and asked them to participate? And was there anyone who you didn't get? I guess I got to ask sometimes.
Oh, yeah. Well, Janis did say to me, you should interview some people who don't like me. They're out there. No, there were a couple of people who I approached. One, I think, was her manager, who didn't want to be interviewed. But for the most part, everyone who I approached did want to be part of it. And they were extremely generous. It's as if we were family. The whole crew, they would open their homes to us. Or, Jean Smart, we interviewed her. We found a location for her. Yeah, and she was like so warm to us. Joan Baez hung out with the whole crew afterwards, and we had snacks together. And, Arlo Guthrie was incredibly articulate and generous, with his time. And so everyone really wanted to be a part of it, and they wanted to contribute their insights. And my idea regarding and how to approach them was that they weren't just there to add some information. Their very presence and what they said was part of the story. who they were was important. And that's kind of how I approach those interviews. And I hope that that comes off, that they're important people in Janis's life, and they, contributed to her journey.
Yes, they seem very personal, like very personal interviews. They were speaking about a dear friend. They weren't the icons that they are. They came from this kind of very warm place.
Yeah, and yet in the sense that you talked about earlier about, rooting Janis in her times, these are also iconic people about those times or societal changes. I mean, you can't talk about people coming out without talking about Lily Tomlin. And then there's Lily Tomlin. So it's not just about, her talking about Janis, but it does root it within what's going on in the larger society.
In some ways, we've sort of reflected a little bit about how Janis has lived multiple lives almost.
Yeah.
And they're somewhat centered in different locations, different periods of songwriting. Mm-hmm. And so each of these people represent different periods of her time. And I found that very fascinating, personally.
100%. I just was thinking about, in terms of reflecting the times, and yet somehow having a sort of a crash of the moment. George Wallace's speech, which I've heard before, but just against where we are now. Segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever.
Oh yeah. We'll take a breath on that, but
it really hits at the moment with some of the discussion that's going on, and I don't want to sideline it, but because the movie is obviously so much more, and it's about this journey over decades, but it did really, the way history can come crash back in a moment to where we are.
I mean, I like what Janis says about that, also in terms of gay rights, and she. There has been progress. Well, it's true. It's true that there's some really regressive things happening. And there's obviously, racism has surfaced, and we're up against some really dark stuff coming at us right now. While at the same time, I want to recognize all the work that Janis and, Arlo Guthrie, Tom Paxton, Lily Tomlin, Joan Baez, they have made a difference. There are things going, there are aspects of society that are much better now. Like what she said, should she have come out and been recognized as being gay in the 60s, she might have gotten a lobotomy.
Yeah.
Now she can openly talk about being married and her love with Pat. And, so there has been progress made, and there's a lot of work to be done. And now we're up against some stuff. So because I really want to acknowledge all the work they did to bring us to this point.
I think that's a really great point. I think that's very fair. Despite the fact that we all get bombarded by the daily headline, it's a good reminder that progress has been made, for sure. You said that this was, it's sort of amazing. This is your first feature film that you're sort of having a theatrical run. Is that right?
Yes. I did my film Big Voice, which was actually about a Santa Monica high school choir director. Because at the time I was going with the philosophy of do something that's close, just look around and there's a story there. And I was, my children went to Santa Monica High School. That was on Netflix, so we got really lucky there. And Fandango at the Wall was picked up by HBO and was on Max. But neither of them Fandango Wall came out during the pandemic, so there was no real theatrical going on then anyway. So this is also my first film set in the past, by the way. So I had a lot of lessons to learn how to bring the past to life. I didn't understand totally going into it that there's nothing in the that this is all the past has to be brought to life. How do we do that? That was the big challenge. That was one of the bigger challenges, actually.
Right. And that's where you obviously opened it up and created all these sort of kind of a kaleidoscope of different ways to sort of do that. There's not even just sort of one way. So what I love about that, again, is that we don't get ahead of you. It's always surprising. But you faced that challenge, and then kind of, did you work with your DP to figure out what those were? How did you storyboard all of those? Were they all scripted? How did you figure that out?
I did create a quite detailed outline that I created ahead of time and then kind of refined and presented to the editor. The outline, I will confess, was quite dense. I love it. Because Janis's story is so amazing, and there's so many amazing parts, that we actually did shoot for, but had to pull out. But it was again, really thinking about the aesthetic of the film, the feel, the vision for it. We shot on Super 8, handheld. And then I would say, like the opening, when we see, Janis as a little girl, I said to the DP, pretend that we're there. We've gone back in time and we're making a documentary. That's kind of was the concept for a lot of the footage, the mood shots, we call them, which are like kind of my imagining of Janis's memories, these fragments, were like, we went back in time, this is happening, and now we're shooting it and we're getting it. So that was one of the ways we got that feel. We also used variable shutter speeds, and all the wardrobe was pulled directly from photographs from different periods that I saw, and tried to get as close as possible to those photos, and the hairstyles. I mean, all of it, the locations, everything, trying to get as close as possible to it, but not, I mean, we call it recreations, but I don't think of it as recreations, really. I think of it as my imaginings of her memories. Because I can't recreate it because I wasn't there.
Right.
I don't know what it was. I can only imagine it. So I didn't try to recreate it so much as evoke it,
Yeah, it works really well.
Yeah, it works great. I mean, there are documentaries that use reenactment, and it's almost a shortcut. And here, it's really just enhancing everything that is around it. Taking the interviews sets it perfectly.
What are the challenges of opening theatrically that you didn't expect? What's the? I mean, there's the thrill and the excitement, and it's wonderful that it's coming to a big screen, and people must see this on a big screen.
I hope so.
But what as a filmmaker, what did you not did you not expect about having a theatrical run?
Well, I appreciate what Sean Baker said, during the Oscars ceremony, and he said how important it is for films to be in theaters, and pretty much like begged people to go to the theater. Yeah. I'm like right behind him with that chorus. There's nothing like seeing a film in the theater. This film, with its incredibly kind of dense visual palette, with the music, Janis's extraordinary body of music, and some of the influences in her life. We have other music in there as well. To experience it in the theater, there's just nothing like it. So I think, the greatest challenge is to get the audience to come. It's not like a film festival where there's already a community and it's set up and they come every year. This is just a room with this projector and a screen and empty seats, waiting for people to come in and sit in them and have this marvelous, magical experience, which I've seen audiences watching our film. I've not seen one screening where I've looked at the audience where I haven't seen them laughing and crying. Yeah. I mean, it's a visual,
and singing,
it's an emotional,
I bet, too.
And singing and feeling really good afterwards too. Feeling really good afterwards.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I really do hope that audiences come and see this film in the theater.
Well, the film has had a long and very successful career on the festival circuit, and that is, a theatrical experience as well. But now you're opening in New York on Friday. I should say Friday, March 28th. So, and you're in New York, and Janis is going to be there as well?
Janis is going to be there. That's one of what we've decided is we want to come and be present and do Q&As and make it really special for everybody.
Fantastic.
We're doing a bunch of, Q&As here in New York. Then we're going to come to Los Angeles.
So we're opening in Los Angeles on April 4th, and we've got Q&As set up for Thursday night leading into the weekend, and then that weekend as well. So you can get that information at lemley.com. And then for further theatrical rollout...
well, we're going to also go to Northern California, and we're going to do some in-person Q&As there. And then I'll continue on probably with a number of other screenings in Nashville and Philadelphia, and we have screenings, across the country, really.
Okay, and the distributor is Greenwich Entertainment, so information is available on their website. Is there a separate place or on social media where people can, find out about these screenings?
Yes, well, we have a Janis Ian documentary website. We have a screening page where we're listing all the screenings, and JanisIan.com, I believe, is listing screenings as well, especially the ones where she's going to be there in person.
Great.
So, and we do have a Facebook page, and we have Instagram, and we have a contact on our Janis Ian documentary website as well. If people want to sign up, we will keep you updated.
I guess I just have a last question, which is essentially,
I get one too.
So okay, then very good. So then, so Janis watched your 18-minute assembly, which you used to raise the film, the funds to finish the film. What was her response when she saw the film altogether?
Oh, you mean after the 18-minute, when she's at the very end?
Clearly you screened this for her at some point, and she saw it, sort of the whole movie. And I wondered how it hit her. I'm trying to remember the very first time she saw the whole thing in a theater setting, which I believe she did. Actually, we had the Irish Film Institute screen the film, a work in progress of the film, I should say. Because her life was being celebrated, her life and times and music was being celebrated in Dublin, where she's beloved. And it still had all the watermarks and so it was kind of a scary thing, but I had turned down a work in progress in the past and that wasn't good. I decided I'm going to just show the work in progress with all the ugly stuff and all. Right, with all its warts and all.
And so she saw it that way first. And she seemed to really like it, and the audience loved it. And then she saw it again at the Doc NYC premiere, and she seemed to really love it. As she says, it's kind of hard because it's her life, and she's seeing it, and it's a bit almost like stunning, you're kind of stunned a little bit. And you have to process it, but she seems very positive about it, and she seems very excited to be part of the release, and so I think she has a good feeling about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it has to be hard to have your life up there, particularly your entire life, and a complicated thing to digest for sure.
But I think again, she seems very positive about the experience to date. So hopefully it'll stay that way. I'm
sure. Obviously she is, and she's coming to the Q&As, and it's a beautiful portrait. So
following the Oscars and the Adrian Brody moment, and I'm thinking about you also referenced Sean Baker, but I'm thinking about Janis. She wins the Grammy for Best Song of the Year 10 plus years after she Society's Child and so many things. And that has to be the shortest acceptance speech in Grammy history. It says a lot about her. Did you ever want to follow up and ask her about that moment?
Yeah, it's not in the film, but I did ask her about it. I think she was kind of stunned at the time. It was just kind of took her. I don't think I think she wanted it, but maybe she didn't fully expect it. And she was kind of like, she couldn't believe it. She was just, I think it's to a certain degree perfect what she said, and it's so fitting for the documentary as well. It's just
and it's so authentic, right? It's just so like
it's her.
This is what I got.
Yeah, it is.
Right.
She just was happy to be back.
Yeah,
good to be back again.
Well, Varda, thank you for making this beautiful film. Thank you for sharing it with us. Thank you for talking to us. We really are excited that it's coming to theaters. People must see this in a theater, and if you can catch it, of course, with Janis at the Q&A. Gosh, I'd love to do that.
Well, just catch it catch the film however you can catch it. And the fact that there are going to be these Q&As, both with Janis at many of them, but certainly wherever you are, it's a great opportunity for people to get a value add. But the film is worth seeing in a movie theater, no matter what it takes.
Thank you, Greg. I just want to thank you for having movie theaters, such lovely ones, and screening these incredible films that you do, and keeping, film alive in that way. It's just so important. And I really am very grateful to you for that. And thank you for having me and for talking about Janis Ian and breaking silence with me. I really appreciate it.
And thank you to everybody out there who's watching and or listening to this. If you are enjoying what you're doing, please please subscribe, please make sure to share so that other people can find out about this film. We do these conversations to help bring added awareness to independent films at a time when independent film needs added awareness. So please be part of the community of rebuilding the independent film sector.
Right. And the words of Sean Baker, go to a theater, right?
Definitely.
Varda.
And it's fun. It's fun. That's the key. And to be in community also.
Yeah, absolutely.
100%. 100%.
Thank you for joining us on Inside the Art House.
Our show was produced by Raphael Sparge, with on-site producer Noreen Dickerson. Supervising producers are Miles McCreary and Thomas Cassetta. Our show was edited by Gabriel Lemon and mixed by Thomas Cassetta. Our musical theme was composed by Isabel England and Gerardo Garcia Jr. Marketing by Gabriel Lemon. Show graphics by Jenny DeAngelis and show open edited by Rick Pratt. Filmed at the historic Lumley Royal Theater in Los Angeles, California. See you next time on Inside the Art House. If you like today's show, please consider subscribing to our channel to hear more on Inside the Art House.